Hey guys, one of the most challenging things in post-production audio is matching dialogue recordings from different microphones so that they sound the same. Now, there are a lot of different tools to do this manually, but I want to introduce you to one of the most powerful ones out there, and that is Izotope's Dialog Match. Dialog Match is specifically designed for this purpose. Say, getting a lav microphone, for example, matching a boom microphone's sound, because obviously lav mics and boom mics sound very, very different. And I've done a video on how to match that perspective manually, but Dialog Match does everything kind of all encompassed into one plugin. So today I want to go over all the different functions Dialog Match offers, tell you all the really awesome things about it, and the one really, really frustrating thing about it as well. Before we get started, if you enjoy these videos, you want to support my channel, head over to alexknickerbocker.com. I've got a PayPal donation link as well as a bunch of royalty-free sound effects that I'm curating for your use from my personal sound effects library. They're tagged with industry standard metadata so you can find everything easily, and I'll be adding more as I can, so don't forget to check back. Alright, first the awesome stuff. Dialog Match makes it really, really easy to get one microphone's kind of sound and timbre matching another microphone's perspective. So I've got a Shure SM58 and a Neumann TLM-103. I'm going to match the Shure to the Neumann just so you can hear how powerful this plugin is. I'm loading this up as an Audio Suite plugin in Pro Tools, which means I'm actually going to have to render all of the audio changes that I want to make into a file rather than using this plugin in real time where it can just kind of adapt to things on the fly. So that's not primarily how I work, but with Dialog Match, that's kind of what you need to do. First, I need to tell Dialog Match what the 103 actually sounds like so it has a reference. So on the reference side of Dialog Match, I'm going to select a little bit of my 103's audio and I'm going to hit capture. So Dialog Match will learn exactly what the 103 sounds like by that reference. Once I have that loaded in, I'm going to do the same thing for the 58 on the apply side of Dialog Match. So I'll find a selection of audio that I think is a good representation of my sound. I'll hit capture on the apply side, and that'll tell Dialog Match again, the 103 is going to be used as a reference to make the 58 sound a little bit more like the 103. Now, it's best to try and use similar performances of lines when you're doing that step, because obviously if you're matching like a whisper to a shout, that's not really going to work. So again, having that consistency is going to help you get the most out of Dialog Match. Once you've captured both selections, you're going to see a whole bunch of different options open up. You can see there are three main modules: EQ, Reverb, and Ambience. And depending on what your source audio was, some of these will be enabled, some of these will be disabled, some of them will be turned up a certain amount or dialed back. It all depends on your source material. And this plugin is pretty good at suggesting good settings out of the box, so generally you don't have to do too much to get Dialog Match sounding correct, but just in case you do, there's an advanced feature for each one of these. Let's take a look at the EQ. Clicking advanced, you can see that this is not your standard EQ curve. This is Dialog Match's suggestions on how it's going to process your audio. Now, there's an amount slider that allows you to kind of dial in the strength of the EQ processing, but you also have a bunch of bands similar to a normal EQ. This is sort of a composite between what Dialog Match is doing as well as how aggressively it's doing it. So not exactly, again, your typical EQ curve, but it'll show you kind of where Dialog Match is going with your sound. If you need to make any adjustments, this does kind of work like a standard EQ. You can select a band, you can make any adjustments to frequency, amplitude, shape, or bandwidth, and it's relatively straightforward, but I'm going to leave this alone because I think it's doing a pretty good job as is. Next, we'll take a look at the reverb. The basic controls are just the wet and dry signals, so your dry unprocessed audio and the wet reverberant audio that you can choose how you layer it. And again, because the TLM-103 is a little bit more sensitive, it's going to pick up a little bit more of the reverb in this space, whereas the SM58 isn't as sensitive to that, so in order to match it more closely, I have to add in just a little bit of reverb to get the same sound of the room that I'm in. Opening up the Advanced tab, this is where it gets kind of interesting. The first thing you see is this triangle here, and each point on the triangle represents a couple of different parameters. On the bottom left, you've got your pre-delay, which is how long the reverb waits after your audio starts before it actually kicks in. And adjusting this is kind of useful if you want your reverb to sound a little bit like you're in a large space or maybe outside. There's a little bit of natural pre-delay when you, say, yell in a canyon somewhere. It's actually going to take a little bit of time for your voice to reach the other side of the canyon and then come back to you. That time would be the pre-delay on a reverb. So again, you can choose how long you want to wait for that to kick on. The top point controls both the level of the reverb overall as well as the attack parameters. So by adjusting this, you can choose if you want your reverb to start smoothly with a slow attack once that pre-delay is done, or you can have it it start really fast and immediately after the pre-delay is done with a short attack. And the final point, of course, is the time it takes your reverb to decay. So shorter times are going to sound like you're in a smaller room like the one I'm in. Longer times you can sound anywhere between a hallway or a giant cavern that echoes forever. It really depends on what sound you're going for. Getting even more advanced, there are some lines behind that triangle that represent your early reflections, and these are kind of the initial shaping building blocks of your reverb. It's got a shape parameter that adjusts the amplitude of those early reflections. You can have them start louder or end louder. It's got a time parameter, so you can determine how long they go in comparison to the actual body of your reverb. And of course, it's got a level parameter that allows you to choose the amplitude overall of those early reflections. And if that wasn't advanced enough, you can actually change the types of reverbs as well from the suggestion that Dialog Match gives you. So you've got a chamber reverb, you've got a hall reverb, and you've got a plate reverb that all lend themselves to various lengths of reverb tails. You generally don't want your reverb processing every single frequency of your audio. You kind of want to tailor it to fill in the gaps in frequencies. So with my voice specifically, I've got a lot of low end resonance, so I'll roll off some of the lower end of the reverb and just carry the high frequencies a little bit to, again, fill in those gaps, make it sound nice and smooth. Same thing goes for higher pitched voices. You can roll off some of the top end using a low pass filter, and it will again fill in those gaps in the bottom range and give you a nice smooth sounding reverb. And finally, there's the density slider, which will simulate how a room or a space absorbs some of the frequencies that a voice recording generates. So obviously a chamber is going to sound different than a plate, and by adjusting the density, you can kind of change the shape of the room, because obviously a small room that's got some reflective surfaces isn't going to sound the same as a large room with dampened surfaces. So it allows you to dial in your reverb more specifically and get your destination audio matched much more closely with your reference audio. The last part of Dialog Match is the easiest, and that is the Ambience module. The Ambience module will look at the incoming audio from your reference mic, and it'll kind of apply the same room tone that that mic picked up to your destination mic. So obviously the ambience that my TLM-103 is picking up will be slightly different than the 58, because this again is much more sensitive of a microphone, this is not. So by applying a little bit of a synthesized noise floor, I can make the 58 sound like it picked up exactly the same stuff as the 103 did. And the last really awesome thing before I get into the one bad thing about Dialog Match, as I'm dialing in all these settings, if I need to reuse the mid-80 point, I can save all of these different parameters to a snapshot. And anytime I encounter a similar audio clip coming from the same microphone or the same perspective, especially if I'm working on longer format pieces like a feature, I can just call up a snapshot and reapply those settings without having to go through the whole relearning process and matching process again. So it's super helpful and super quick to match all of your audio across a project. And finally, the one downside of Dialog Match, and it's a big one, it's only available as an Audio Suite plugin in Pro Tools 11 or higher. It's not available for any other software in any other format, which is really, really frustrating. I wish it was available for DaVinci, and I wish it was available for Premiere or Audition or anything else, but unfortunately, because it's so specifically tailored, it's really only working in Pro Tools right now. So hopefully Izotope will develop it out and provide it for other pieces of software, but that is a really, really frustrating downside, I know. So that's Dialog Match in a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm sorry if you're not working in Pro Tools, but I hope just by knowing the software is out here, you're going to be able to collaborate that much better with audio teams that are going to be able to use it. And if you decide to pick up Pro Tools at any point, you know you're going to be in good hands and you're going to be able to get the most out of your audio. Hit like if you enjoyed, subscribe to my channel if you want more post-sound content. I'm over on Instagram at AXK, so come follow me over there. And as always, thanks for watching.